I lived through many business bumps or recessions, though none as bad as this one. But after each, there's a common problem. Customers think you may have closed. Now, with 600,000 UK businesses fearing insolvency and many big brand names already disappearing, I suggest it's vital that you maintain or even heighten visibility of yourself and your business. But how to do it, and how to do it efficiently, effectively, and economically. This could be vital to your future. So I firmly believe in getting a little expert help. And I mean expert and proven help. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity of inviting you to meet that true expert. She's much in demand by business leaders for her expertise, full of energy and ideas, as I've already found in our warm-up chat. So let's meet Helen Croydon. Helen, lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Thanks for that lovely intro.
Obviously, we're doing it at a social distance, aren't we? You know, you down in London and me way back up in nearly Scotland, to be honest.
Yes.
Is that far enough away? Are we beyond 2 meters?
I think so. I think we're safely 2 meters apart.
Okay. So please tell us about yourself, and in particular about your firm here. You can see the URL, everybody, on the screen there. Tell us about yourself and your firm.
Well, I'm a former journalist and broadcaster, and I'm also an author. I've written 3 books. So I use that background, that media background, and now to help others get into the media. So I specifically focus on personal PR and raising the profiles of individuals rather than corporations. And the reason I do that is because as a former journalist and author and someone who was on TV myself, I've kind of tested the formula. So I use that formula now to help others. So that's my USP. I'm non-sector specific, but it's that I help CEOs, business leaders, entrepreneurs, individuals, not businesses.
Okay. So in my sort of preamble there, I did say about the need for visibility at this particular time. Am I right in my thinking that the leader who needs that visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even before COVID-19, it was very, very important that businesses now have a human face behind the business. I think consumers are getting, they're tired of those marketing messages and having a stuffy CEO who hides behind statements. Those days are gone. And
Right.
particularly so now, it's even, more than ever, leaders, individuals really need to have a profile. If you think what the tools that might have worked in the past, such as going to networking events, having one-on-ones, going to conferences, round tables, and all that energy and expertise that you can exude in a room, they no longer work now that we're all online.
Done.
So the equivalent to that now is having searchability, appearing on page 1 in Google, or perhaps having an article in an industry magazine, or ideally a top tier publication, but we all know how hard that is to get that. But just some articles or a following on social media, that's now how we can exude a sense of expertise and sharing much more, that was the case anyway, but now in lockdown, that's just so much more important.
Yeah. So is it hard to get the right visibility? Because, people have become cynical in some ways of PR style communication, haven't they? So what needs to be done to get that visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes to the crux of why I wanted to start my business, which is because I think I have a unique perspective on PR in that I don't come from a PR background. I come from a media background. So a lot of media professionals and marketing professionals or just entrepreneurs who are doing their own marketing, they believe that it's all about messaging. There's certain phrases that you need to use, such as "I am very proud to do this," or "We are delighted that delighted that X, Y, Z." But these are all very PR centric cliches. These have all been created by the industry, and it doesn't mean that they're correct.
Yeah.
So in the media, in a newsroom, we don't even use the word messaging. There's no such thing as get your messaging across. The newsroom sees interviewees, whether it's TV or whether it's getting a quote in a newspaper. They see those people as people giving genuine insight or comment or personal anecdotes. And that's the key. So if you want to get your expertise into the media, or even if it's not in the media, if you want to get your expertise read and listened to on social media or on your own blog, you have to show authenticity. And I know that's a buzzword in itself, but what I mean by authenticity is those genuine insights. So, you can't get a message across through messaging. You have to get a message across through being, making it relevant to the wider topic that's being discussed in society. And in a way, this is what is relevant on so many levels. So for example, as an author, I wrote a memoir about getting into triathlon and getting into outdoor sport, right? On the surface of it, that could seem quite boring, and reading about someone going on a run is not a very interesting story, but I made my story, try to make it wider, to make it relevant to wider debates, such as why aren't there more women in sport, what put me off until I was a certain age, maybe it's feminine ideals, and all those, the deeper stuff that you can dig into. So this is what business leaders need to do, or academics or authors or business coaches or anyone that wants to get into the media. They need to think, right, how is my expertise relevant to a wider societal issue? And it's not just about their own story and their own messaging.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I have been interviewing, as you know, lots of CEOs in lockdown situations.
Right.
I think there's a fascinating range of stories there. But, look, I read that you're strong on helping leaders craft the right story that grabs attention. So where do they usually go wrong, and what do they need to correct?
Yeah. So I think there's a few common mistakes that I come across. Some of them are just mentioned in the previous answer, which is, talking about yourself and not making it relevant to the wider issue. There's a few common things I spot when in writing. So if in writing an article, like either if it's a thought leadership article that you're hoping to get placed in the press, or if it's a blog or something, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is long introductions, telling the reader why they need to read what they're reading. So take like a really simple example. Say if you're the CEO of a printing company, right? And you've written an article about how to fix your printer or something. This is a really basic example. But what you don't want to do, you don't want to have the first 2 paragraphs saying it's really important to fix your printer because you need to, it's much easier if you can print out notes of an interview and have it in front of you than to read it off the screen, for example, right? People don't need to know why they need to read it. And likewise, I think a lot of aspiring writers waste a lot of time in those introductions, or in the same way when they're doing a presentation, they don't get to the point.
Right.
So that's one of the common mistakes. And I think another one is going back to those cliches. I keep using cliches and using a language that has been set by the PR industry. So I keep getting newsletters. We're all getting about 5 newsletters a day from companies telling us what they're doing with COVID-19. Now that's fine if we think, if there's a reason for them to send that newsletter, like, it's an optician's telling us that they're closing their branches. But we do need to know that. But if it's just someone saying, our services are running and we're doing all we can to help you, and we're monitoring the advice of the government carefully, and I'd like to thank all our delivery drivers, and all that sort of stuff is it's generic stuff. You'd expect every company should be thanking its drivers. Every company should be monitoring the government's advice. So you just don't need to put that sort of stuff in your newsletter. You don't even need to put it on your website. Just communication should be a needs must basis.
Yeah. It often seems some of those ones, and we get them through too, that somebody just copied and pasted from somebody else. Yeah.
And it's just noise. It's online noise in a world where, we're bombarded by online noise, and we all get, 3-figure emails like every single day. So we just don't need more news
Yeah.
sources.
Okay, so let's talk about media. What do you think frightens people about the media, and how should they overcome such fear?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing, and because I do media training as well for some of my
Right.
clients, one of the biggest things that they say when I ask them this question is a fear of being caught out.
Yeah.
And it all goes, it's the Jeremy Paxman style of
Yeah.
question they're scared of. But in actual fact, that sort of questioning is very rare, and it's
Yeah.
only reserved for people in high positions of responsibility that do need to be held accountable for their actions. So, for example, politicians
Yeah.
or role models,
Yeah.
or maybe CEOs of public companies. They may be asked tough questions, but really, a journalist only wants to catch someone out because they want to get a good news line. And it's only going to be a news line if you are a person of interest. If you're just kind of a small business owner that no one's heard of, even if you say something controversial, that's never going to be news because you're not a public company CEO.
Yeah.
So journalists are not going to be asking you probing questions. 80%, I think, this is a made up figure, 80% of interviews, whether it's TV, radio, print, digital, are going to be journalists looking for insights from an expert that they can't give themselves. So it's the reason they interview people is to give the color, and it's to give the anecdotes. So they might interview a business owner to say, well, look, how is this for you? What is it like managing a team remotely? So because the journalists can't write that because they're not in that position. So it's the insights. It's not, they're not there to catch you out unless you're a politician. The only other exception is if it's a crisis scenario interview. So, for example, if you're at the centre of a storm and you're having to defend something, then you have reason to be a bit fearful and to prepare. And I think the other people struggle with in media training, or the misconception that they have of the media, is that journalists will report everything, and that they're just always on the lookout for a story. So when I was a journalist, I used to say, I went to a party or something, and people say, what would you do? And I'd say, I'm a journalist. And they'd say, oh, I better not say anything to you then. You're going to go, I might end up in the press.
Yeah.
And you just roll your eyes and think, well, how? Because do you have any idea how difficult it is to get a story into the media? I've had some absolutely brilliant tip-offs for stories from high-profile people that have said things or done things, and I've got evidence to back it up. And it still doesn't make the paper because it's not the right mix of stories, or that name isn't quite big enough, or it doesn't relate to anything else that's topical. Editors are pretty picky and pretty choosy with what goes in. So I think, you should be so lucky if you get a story in the media. So that's the other thing. They're just, most journalists, are not looking for a story in the first place because they're probably features journalists or interview journalists. You're a journalist, you're not looking for exposés. But are they... And the second thing is, even if they were, they probably wouldn't get it into the paper anyway.
Yeah. I was once filming the editor of the Journal, which is a newspaper here in Newcastle upon Tyne. And he said, when we're looking at a story, it's one of those ones that you want to look at if you're reading it in the pub and nudge your mate and say, hey, have you seen this? So it's a story that's general. Yes,
and that is brilliant advice that you could give to anyone who wants to do their own PR or pitch to the media. That what you've just said is exactly what I tell them. Say it how you would tell someone in the pub. What is the top line story? What is interesting about this?
Yeah, the only problem with that is the pubs are closed at the moment, so it doesn't work that way. Right. Okay, listen, we hear of newspapers and closing all the time, and that's quite sad, because I used to work for Thompson's, and a great newspaper chain at the time there. And it's closing, particularly all the local ones. Now, where are the new opportunities in media to get good exposure?
Well, as the saying goes, I suppose some doors close and one door closes and another door opens. Yes, there are a lot of the top tier print publications have closed, but in their place have become a plethora of mid-tier publications and the blogs and the digital titles that, okay, maybe not everyone has heard of, but they are more niche and they do have a very strong following of people, of whom the topics are relevant for. So it's a much more niche following. So these publications are the sorts that look for contributor-based content. Right. So they want experts, or the so-called thought leaders, the people that I try and help. They want those people to write for them because they want business leaders to write about leadership or how they're overcoming the crisis, or or their vision for business in the rest of 2020, for example. And these are, so that's a great place for where these opportunities lie, because they do have niche followings. However, it's still quite competitive to get in there. It doesn't mean that they'll just publish anything. You still have to offer, genuine insight, not the messagey stuff. And they can spot when something's been ghostwritten by a marketing department. They can spot it a mile off. So they still have, very well-trained editors commissioning stuff for these publications.
Excellent.
I think another avenue as well that's opened up is branded journalism. There are a lot of companies now that have got their own editorial teams and they're investing in it. So they're running it like a news publication. They've employed editors, journalists, and they're commissioning their own content. And they do it for them. What's in it for them is it's a marketing platform. It brings people to their site. But they're not only publishing their own stuff, they are trying to be impartial and commission third-party content. So a good example of this is Dropbox. They've got their own blog. And I believe I read somewhere that HSBC has employed a former editor of CNBC to oversee some of their content. So it's not the Times, but these are all platforms that are looking for content. So I think there are plenty of opportunities out there. It just might be that there aren't as many opportunities to be featured, to get an actual feature written about you, but there's a lot more opportunities to write things yourself.
So perhaps a lot more exposure and a lot more media all coming together that might total the exposure you would have got in the past in, say, one newspaper. So, you splintered out. You splintered out.
Well, it's always good. It's good to have a mix of content on a mix of platforms. If you can have a few articles, if you can have appeared on a podcast, appeared on a online TV station such as this one. It's always good. The more platforms you can be on, the more visible you'll become, and the more visible you are, the more authentic you'll appear, and the wider net that you'll cast, because you will reach people that you wouldn't normally reach.
But we are finding, just as a side issue there, that some people are liking those that have got a smaller viewership or listenership like ourselves. So, for example, Sir Keir Starmer gave us half an hour of, complete soul interview, Lord Adonis and people like that.
Right.
Because they know that we may not have got the quantity, but we've got the quality of the viewers and the readers. Okay, let's talk about leadership and leaders, because obviously thought leadership and the way that you're coaching CEOs, communications is an important aspect, and it's something that a lot of leaders in the past have said, well, I don't need to do that. I'll pass that down to a department. Where do you see leaders going wrong in their approach to communications, either internally or externally? What should they do about correcting themselves and where they're going wrong?
I think it all comes down to authenticity again. Showing the human side, not being that stuffy leader who's unapproachable, and not being afraid to admit mistakes, or to admit you're not entirely sure of the direction right now, but you're confident in leading people in the right direction. That's from an internal perspective. And externally, where do they go wrong in their communications? I think it's by not being open to talk about other things.
Right.
And it does depend on your goal. I am aware that not everyone wants to be more visible. Not everyone does want an online profile. But if you do, you have to be a bit flexible with the subjects that you write about. For example, I worked with a quite a high profile music producer,
Okay.
and he'd done quite a lot of interviews with the media, but he said to me, I want to do more interviews, but I don't want to talk about the same thing. He said, they just keep asking me about all the musicians that I represent. And I was like, well, that's because you're a music producer. That's what makes you interesting.
Yeah.
And if he says, no, I want to talk about the business. I want to talk about how I'm growing my business, but so does every other business leader out there. So it's about finding how can you talk about the things that you might be tired about talking about, that the media might find interesting, but then weave in a few references about your business and about your leadership. That's the skill of PR, and that's probably why you need a professional to help you do it, because but you can't just ditch the thing that makes you interesting. I've got another CEO that I work for, without divulging too much about what he does, but he's an expert on saving money, frugality, and being frugal. And he has a tech platform to help businesses do that. And he has a bit of a rags to riches story. And again, he doesn't necessarily want to tell it again, because he says, well, it's not about me. I want to talk about the business. I don't want to talk about, my childhood story. And I say, well, if I don't mention that in my pitches to the media, they're probably not going to be interested in you. But how about I mention that in the pitches to the media, but then, you can gloss over that question by maybe saying, well, this, my background taught me the importance of frugality, and that's what I instill in my business. And then you can talk about the business. But I think you do have to recognize as a leader what the outside world finds interesting, and actually what you yourself want to talk about. It doesn't always tally with what people want to hear.
Yeah. And that's superb advice. No, look, I know you offer expert media training to leaders. I'm just pointing. I've learned how to point up the different ways, now. But I'm pointing to your URL there. I know you offer expert media training to leaders. Do you think that they need to cascade that further down their firm now that more team members are using things like Zoom?
Yes, I do, because I think there are lots of workers in the team who can offer a lot of value.
Yeah.
So, for example, I did some media training for an energy consulting firm. So yes, the CEO is probably the most senior person that the media wants to interview. But if the media are looking for trends in the oil and gas industry, or they're looking for insights and analytics on reports that company's produced, then they want to speak to the analysts on the ground. So providing it's an employee that has some unique expertise and that can really add value to that interview, then yes, the employees on the ground need to have that media training, because the media will want to speak to whomever the story is most relevant to. It's like now we're seeing health workers being interviewed all the time, aren't we? We're not seeing the head of the NHS being interviewed. We're seeing the people on the ground, because that's who the public want to hear from.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely. Okay, so do too many leaders try to adopt a one message fits all for their communications instead of customizing that message to the audience they're talking to?
Yes, they do. And I'd say, always customize. It's always got to be about, responding to a situation, responding to a question. No matter what you have prepared, you've always got to, react to whatever's being asked of you, or whatever the audience wants. So if you go on LinkedIn, you can spot these like one message fits all things all the time. I did note one down because I knew you were going to ask me this. And it's, honestly, I anonymized it and I've got to read it out because it's, where is it now? Yeah, here we go. So this is a typical LinkedIn post of someone that doesn't customize. I'm very excited to join X company as CEO with the opportunity to lead a highly skilled team. X company is purpose-built to reimagine enterprise security with our XYZ product. Our cloud native technology enables XYZ collaboration and a variety of organizational use cases. I mean, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, yes, I know.
You know, what does it mean? And so, yeah, you've just got to think what if he just thought, right, what am I trying to say here? And he thought, I'm trying to say, I'm absolutely delighted that I've become CEO today. Really looking forward to this, this next chapter. Or if he wants to be even more authentic, he could just say, took on the new role today, little bit daunted because I'm managing the new team and we're all online and I can't meet anyone face to face like anyone else. This is challenging times, and really show, what he's probably really feeling.
Yeah, sounds like he got either his legal team to write that one, or he took it from Chapter 7 of his Terms and Conditions.
Exactly.
Okay. Hey, I don't know about you, but we've got a new game here, and it's called Watching TV and Not Listening to the Interviewee, because we're too busy looking at what's behind them, the bookshelves and so on. So what are your top tips on both personal appearance and the right setting for an interview that conveys the right image?
Oh gosh, those bookshelves in the background. I commented on this the other day to my partner when we were watching the news. It's every interviewee that I see who's coming across, who's been invited on as an expert in some way. They've all got a bookshelf behind them. Every politician, every business leader, everyone who's affiliated to some, research organization, they've all got bookshelves as if to show that they're being really learned. And I cannot imagine that coincidentally, wherever their desk is, there happens to be a bookshelf behind it. And I just think it looks too stage.
Yeah.
It's too cliche. And I just think have a natural background. The simple advice I give people in media training is, first of all, don't worry about your opinion more than you're going to worry about what you're going to say, because otherwise, you'll be put off. Secondly, just wear something simple. So what works in real life doesn't necessarily work on a small screen. So jewelry can often look a bit too fussy. So can patterns and shiny fabrics. Mm-hmm. So be simple. And just make sure there isn't a mess in the background.
Yes.
I mean, before I came on this show, I was so busy, like the last few days, I didn't even think about my background. And, as you can vouch, I got on and I was like, oh, right, I better move that, because I've been doing Zoom calls all these weeks and I haven't really cared. I just thought, just get on the call. So I think that's a far better way to be than to stage it all. The one important thing, though, the one simple thing you can do that will make a difference is have some light in front of you.
Right.
So that you've got a light shining on your face. So if you can be, which I have not followed that advice, actually, because I've got a window here. So I don't practice what I preach, but you can see this side of my face is dark. So do have a light in front of you.
Yeah, I've heard that some of the media are starting a sort of a competition as to who's got the worst background at the moment, and it was one academic the other week. Yeah.
And what was that?
The books were just not organised; they're all over the place, And I think there was a 40 Shades of Grey thing shown as well.
Oh, I like that. I think disorganized books is great. It shows that they're actually being used and they're not just there as ornaments.
Yes, it just looked like he was way out of the cloud, and as such, maybe you don't take his authority in the same way as you would if it was every neatly organized. But look, in my experience, then too many leaders are fearful of looking stupid in a media interview. We just talked about that just recently there. They're worried that they're going to handle a question or fear that they're going to be tried to be tripped up. How should they go about preparing? What sort of training should they do beforehand?
I say to people, prepare 5 points and 5 proofs. So what I mean by 5 points is your 5 key things that you want to say. I don't call them messages. This is what maybe a PR or marketing professional might say. This is your messaging. But I don't use that term because the media don't use that term, and we don't use it in everyday language, do we? We don't use it in our everyday life. In an interview, you want to come across like you're talking in your everyday life. You want to come across as a human. So I don't use messaging, use points. What are the points you're trying to make? Don't prepare more than 5, because if you do, you get something that I call analysis paralysis. And I know, because as an author, I used to go and talk about my books on TV. And the first few times I'd done it, I was like, oh my God, I've got all this stuff to say, so many points. And then I'd get on air and I'd just freeze, because someone asks you a question and you think, well, which of those many points do I start with? So 5 key things. And when I say proofs, 5 points, 5 proofs, the proof is like an anecdote to back it up, or a little example. It might be a statistic, or it might be just an example that you've come across.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I really enjoyed our chat, by the way, and we're at the last question. Virtual conferencing and virtual selling is likely to be, as we're calling it, this new normal, isn't it, in global trading. So do you think additional media skills are needed to handle such things as visual online meetings with overseas customers or contacts? After all, you can't physically shake hands or truly see their body language. How do you read a person virtually?
Yeah, this is an interesting area, and there are all sorts of experts emerging who can comment on this a lot better than I can. But this whole, virtual communication, it's opened up all these unanswered questions. For example, like before lockdown, I've never had a Zoom call with more than 4 people, and that would be in a work scenario where it's all structured and one person says this and there's an agenda. But now, groups of friends are having Zoom calls with like 8-10 people on. And it's just created this weird scenario where, who speaks first, and are
protocol.
You talking over someone, and you end up where there's slightly more extroverted people get all the limelight, and the introverted people are like, oh, is it okay to speak? Am I speaking over someone? So, and it highlights just how in natural communication, little break-off groups happen a lot more frequently than I think we're aware of. And all this new form of communication has highlighted all this. So I think with that, there has become a need, yes, to learn the skills of how to negotiate that. Not just, okay, how do I negotiate a conversation with 8 people? But that's just one example of many things that have been thrown up. Such as, that I've just described, and maybe how do you keep eye contact? Is it okay to look away from the computer while you're thinking?
Right.
And I think, yes, it is, because you do in real life, don't you? It's kind of natural to sort of look away when your brain is like processing something. So, but can you do that on a Zoom call? So I do think.
Or does it make you look shifty? Make you look shifty?
Does it make you? Yeah. And what sort of background do you have? I think there is going to be a rise in courses being offered on this sort of thing after we emerged from lockdown. Just like, they'll be packaged in the same way that media training is.
Well, and in that, as we finish on that, obviously they need to come to the expert for that. So back to that URL, if they pop along to there, is that correct? That's how they can get in touch with you, Helen?
thoughtleadership.com.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for a fabulous interview and some great ideas and thoughts.